We're lazy monks. We get up at 6:15, but at like a Trappist monastery, they get up at 2 or 3 a.m., depending on the time of year. What is St. Benedict's rule of life? As a Benedictine monk, this is obviously an important question to me. My name is Father Boniface Hicks, and this is Ascension Presents. St. Benedict's rule of life consists of a prologue and 73 chapters. Now, some of those chapters are only a couple of lines, so it's actually quite a thin little book. And it covers a number of different dimensions of the life of a monk. A monk lives in community under the direction of an abbot and lives according to this rule that was written 1,500 years ago by St. Benedict. We might ask the question, well, is there a most important verse in the rule? If you had to know one, is there one that kind of holds the rest together? And Blessed Columba Marmion, who was a Benedictine abbot who lived in the late 19th and early 20th century, Columba Marmion said, the key verse of the rule is from chapter 19. We believe that the divine presence is everywhere, and that in every place the eyes of the Lord are watching the good and the wicked. And that's the fixation of the monk, to become aware of the divine presence. And everything else in the rule we can understand as being oriented around that goal. How can I become aware of God's presence? And St. Benedict identifies all of these different areas of our life, external circumstances that we can become aware of God's presence. Of course, there's the dimension of personal prayer, and there's also the dimension of the brothers in community. We hear God's voice speaking through our brothers in community. We also receive the voice of God, the presence of God through Scripture. St. Benedict teaches us how the instruments of the workshop are to be treated like the sacred vessels of the altar. So he's helping us to tie together the dimension of our work with our awareness of God's presence. St. Benedict says that the guest should be welcomed as Christ. That is to say, when someone visits the monastery, we expect that that person brings God's presence to us in a special way. Christ is present in the sick, and St. Benedict quotes from Matthew chapter 25, I was sick and you visited me. And that goes for the sick monks. Also throughout history, monasteries have been connected with hospitals and taking in the sick, as monasteries have also been connected with pilgrims and have received guests. St. Benedict also recognizes the presence of God in the young. Historically, monasteries also got connected with orphanages in one way, and nobility entrusted their sons and daughters to monasteries, even at very young ages. My own patron, St. Boniface, was committed to the monastery at age 7. A little bit horrifying to our modern ears, but there was a place for monasteries taking in the young. And we would have that continued in some ways in boarding schools. And monasteries have been associated with prep schools, boarding schools for a long time throughout history and throughout the world. St. Benedict also encourages the monk to be aware of the presence of Christ in the old, in the elderly of the community. And a healthy monastic community stretches from young members. We don't have monks that are 7 years old anymore, but we do have monks that are 18 or 21 or 22 years old, all the way to those monks. And in our own community, we have monks in their 90s. We had a monk who died a little earlier in my monastic life at age 103. So we have monks who go the whole range of young to old, and St. Benedict encourages us, teaches us how to be aware of the wisdom that comes to us through the elderly. This is part of the guidance that St. Benedict provides for monks so that we can recognize the presence of God. Remember that key verse, the divine presence is everywhere. And we really learn to recognize it in the monastery. St. Benedict also recognizes the presence of God communicated to us through times. Monasteries usually have bells to call the monks to prayer, and we think of the bells as the voice of God or the voice of the angels calling us to prayer, and to such an effect that we drop our work even in midstream and go to the chapel to gather for prayer for the divine office. How do we become sensitive to the presence of God in all of these different ways? Well, the next verse teaches us, beyond the least doubt, we should believe this to be especially true when we celebrate the divine office. And this is truly the heartbeat of the monastery. We gather together as a community many times a day. In the most traditional and strict monastic communities, they gather 7 times a day, and even in the middle of the night, so that's 8 times. And so repeatedly throughout the day, the monks are interrupting every other activity to hold that activity above all, such that St. Benedict can say, the monk should cherish the Opus Dei, the work of God, the divine office, above all. So that becomes a point of resetting. When the monks gather for the divine office, which is the prayer of the church, and that's a prayer that we take up God's own words, primarily the Psalms, also some other readings, and we're giving God's words back to him. God is the author of sacred scripture, the primary author of sacred scripture. And so I'm quoting him back to him, we could say. God is worthy of that kind of honor when we take his words and give them back to him, put them to music and sing them together in chorus, back and forth across the monastic choir. That's the heartbeat of our day. And St. Benedict spends 8 chapters of those 73 chapters in the Rule organizing exactly what that liturgy looks like. And the chapter I read to you from is the conclusion of those chapters in the Rule. So all of these arrangements of the day, centering around the liturgy of the hours, the divine office, the chanting of the Psalms and reading of the scripture in community, that's the arrangement of the life of the monk that's provided by the Rule of St. Benedict. We should be the experts, the professionals. We make profession as monks to do this really well, and hopefully we can help to teach everyone else, and as we create environments where others can come and experience the life of a monk on retreat a little bit and pick up some of that wisdom to help sanctify daily life as well. So a few little points about the Rule of St. Benedict that we live out as monks in a full way, I hope, and that everybody can benefit from in one way or another.